are back. Look at that. It finally works. Just 1 second. It says I'm live. All right. Let me know that you're here if you're here. I apologize for all the confusion. I'm going to play for a minute. We're just going to see if any of this garbage works. Charles. Hey guys, sorry for all the confusion and mayhem this morning. I, for some reason, kept losing my internet connection. And then the question becomes, after multi-streaming starting many things here, I don't know which one is actually working or not. So, I apologize. Hey, let me know who's here. Let me know... Actually, how do I do this? Let me know if you guys have any questions. I'm all thrown for a loop here today. I don't know. It's kind of a mess. So, I'm also curious. I've got this. This is streaming on Facebook and YouTube at the same time. And I usually don't do this. Alright, this needs to stop. I am almost got my head out of my butt here. Here I am. Okay. Hey Travis, are you on YouTube or Facebook? Hey Robert. Hey, if you guys have questions, my whole morning's just been kind of gone out the window, so I'll start with opening the floor up. YouTube is cool. If you can watch me on YouTube, that would be really cool because that's actually where I get my hours. But anywhere is good. So I was kind of talk a little bit about some really simple jump blues ideas, and they apply to anything. But I kind of like the idea of couching them in the jump blues thing because when we start playing other styles of blues, we start thinking about that sort of thing a little bit more. Whereas if we go back to this idea where we're relating stuff more to chord tones, then we can move the ideas around a little bit more. All right, so I'm gonna let's talk about the progression real quick. One of these buttons here will work. Okay, I'll put my guitar down for a second. All right, just as a quick refresher on blues chord progressions, everyone here that I'm aware of kind of knows this stuff already, but the backing track I was just playing is in the key of G. All right, so typically you get your 1 chord, 4, and then usually a traditional blues has a 5 chord here and a 4 chord here. Jazzier blues will have like a 2 chord and a 5 chord here, and then back to the 1 chord. Actually, there needs to be 1 chord there too. All right, and a lot of times in the jump blues or rock and roll stuff, these two guys here just end up being a big 5 chord. All right, and the reason for that is because it all functions as a big 5 chord anyway. All right, sometimes you end up having a quick change, a 4 chord right here, and then back to the 1 chord. All right, but that's the format we're going to talk about. And the backing track that we've got, we're in the key of G. And in G, let's do this. G, C, G, D, and then G. That's the important stuff. And we'll come back to this in a second. All right. No, we had this, and I don't have it anymore, so I'm going to recreate it real quick. And we're going to do it in this key, right? So we're in G. This is our 1 chord. Those are the roots. All right, and within this, we have a certain hierarchy of notes, right? We have the 3rd, 5th, and the root. And these guys, they're the triad. They're the important notes that actually create the sound of the chord that you're playing over. And those are important chords to know, except for by themselves, they're kind of useless in that they don't actually give you any kind of melody, right? So what happens, all right, is you end up having it just sounds like bugle calls because they're the chord notes. All right, so without filling in too much of this, I'm going to add in a second layer of notes here. These green guys, we're going to put the 6th in first. We're going to put it there, and we're going to put it there. And what that does is that gives us a non-chord tone to allow us to bounce the melody off of. All right, now that I've got this note and this note here, what I'm playing actually makes a little bit more sense. So if I was to, let's play this guy for a second. There's right onto the 4 chord. Let me back this up. Boring, but now with the 6, I'm over the 4 chord, back to the 1 chord. Alright, that sort of thing actually helps you start creating really simple phrases that make sense in a little swingier context without getting into the bluesier vocabulary. Alright, the next idea here that fits into this is the idea of the minor third. This is the other important note. All right, and that minor third, we've talked about this a zillion times too. The idea is that you're approaching the third from a half step below. And a lot of times, like when we're singing or when we're bending notes, right, what ends up happening here is that you've got this note that wants to be the major third. Right, and it gets there, and the ear hears the potential for that being in tune, not the fact that it's not in tune. Right, if you get in tune with it, right, that sounds great. When you start bending that much in tune, this stuff goes from blues to sounding like country music. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But we like to play in this space between the major and the minor third. But when we're dealing with purely fretted notes, no bends, we like to use that half step below as an approach tone. Let me turn down this delay a little bit. This is a little obnoxious. All right. So these are some of the mechanics that we use to actually create simple phrases in this style. Yeah, in the mood. Yeah, you're right, Charles. It is. Okay, so that's the first part of building phrases like this. Now, the easy thing to do, and we're going to get into a bunch of other stuff here in a second, but we're just going to use this smaller sampling of notes, is I'm going to take these guys, and I'm going to take a simple idea, and I'm just going to move it through the changes here. So I've got G, and then I'm going to do the easy thing and go straight up to C and D. Right? And the nice thing about this, what happens here, is that, get this camera focused right here, is that I can take a simple idea and just move it through the changes. We're going to talk about some different kinds of changes, but I can take that's just the third. Same idea, but in C. Down to the G. Alright. So you guys can kind of see the first thing that we can do is we can take a phrase that works in one place and works all over the place. Now, if we do the more like straight ahead blues idea where we play pentatonic scales, if I was to do that with the pentatonic scale, it wouldn't work very well at all, because that scale wants to relate to the key center more, right? So you don't have enough time for each of these other chords to become their own keys, and it sounds bad. So it'll sound like this, or it's like less than optimal, I will say. So I'll just do pentatonic stuff. Doesn't really fit the chords as well as quickly, I think is part of it. If we were switching from one chord to the other and they were lasting like 4 bars each or a certain amount of time, it would almost allow each of those chords to kind of become its own key, and then we could get away with playing like that. But when you're in this chord progression where the chords go by real quick and overall those chords combine to say, hey, we're in the key of G or we're in the key of B flat or whatever, you kind of have to treat it more like you've got the one parent scale, which in this case would be the G, and then you'll end up having the chords, which we'll treat more individually, for this sort of thing, right? So that first idea where I went minor third, third, and then 5 in the root from our, oops, it would help if I showed you what, from this guy here, right? That's all I was using for that. And we can add other notes. So the other notes that work really well in this context, and these are going to be more second tier. We're going to give them a different color here. Actually, we're going to make them purple. They're not that important. I like the 9. Believe it or not, I'm going to put the minor 7. All right, remember that these are 7th chords, so this is G7. Now we spell it, it's the root, 3, 5, and then the minor 7, not a major 7. All right, so these notes here, I'll put the 9 there. Those are cool too, but they're a little less important to me sonically. All right, so if I go back to our backing track, let me take a couple different whacks at this. There's that minor 7, and then up to the C. Okay, so not a very cool solo, but that solo, those ideas fit a lot better than what I was doing with just the scales. Okay, so other things that we can do, and we're gonna do this kind of a little haphazardly here. Let's talk a little bit about things like you can put this X right here. That says that we can play chromatically passing between the two notes. So I'm just going to take that really simple idea right there where I'm going 6 down to 5. And as long as I'm starting on a note that is in this and I'm ending on a chord tone, these ideas are going to work with the chromatic passing tones, right? But what I can do is I can just take a real simple idea here. And this is what we're aiming for, the simple ideas. So 6 down to 5 chromatically. And I'll move it up to the C. All right. Once again, not the greatest thing in the world, but it works in following those changes. And a lot of times, if you have a lot of solos to do, so doing something like this where it's a repetitive riff is kind of helpful. It does kind of work. I can also, instead of having to move around so much, I know that, okay, so this is the 5 and the 6 for this. All right, if we think about the fact that a lot of times we're playing one position, you got the G with the root on the 6th string, and we can play the 4 and the 5 chords with the root on the 5th string, everything gets a lot closer. All right, so the notes, once we get into this idea, there's your root, there's 3, 5, there's 5, there's a 3 over here. We're not going to pay that much attention to it. Let's go for the green guys. We got the 6 here. We got a 6 here. Minor 3, minor 3. Purple. All right, and then 9, 9, minor 7, minor 7, minor 7. All right, so I can take an idea where I know, like this really simple chromatic idea from 6 to 5, and I can just move it up a string. So here we're in G. And then relative to the 4 chord, that root, we're just going up a string. And obviously if that's the 4 chord, we go up to the 5 chord, that's up 2 frets and it's there. So let's play that idea. Actually, I'll play that. I'll leave this up. so I'm just going to improvise a little bit. Let's move up here to the C. Okay, so I'm going to stop for a second to kind of open it up for questions. The basic idea here is just that if you know what these things are relative to your chord shapes, then it becomes a lot easier for you to take an idea that works over one chord and move it into another chord. And part of the reason that we do that is because we want to have a sense of development. We want to actually be able to play a solo that has an idea and then develops that idea and takes your solo idea over the longer term from one place to the other, instead of it just being a bunch of licks. When I first started learning how to play stuff like this, everything was like, oh, I've got this lick, and oh, I stole this lick off of this record, and I stole this lick from this guy. And I wasn't really thinking in terms of what the overall melody or the melodic content was. I was always really just thinking about the fact that, hey, I've got a lick that works here. Right? And now, when I play stuff like this, it's much more interesting to me to take an idea and manipulate it through the changes. Right? I don't necessarily do this first idea where I'm moving like really laterally. I generally tend to take these ideas and play them kind of in one position, which means that you have a little bit better command of the fretboard, right? And this is all that cage system junk, right? Because I can play, there's G, there's C, there's the D, so I can play all of those chords right there, right, without having to move around so much. And even, right, I can play, in multiple octaves in the same place and take a phrase through everything. And I guess that's part of what I'm trying to get at today, is this idea that if you learn some of these ideas relative to the root, you don't have to think of this like algebra all the time, which is kind of what it looks like when we're talking about it here. But what it does do is it gives you a sense of how everything lays out on the fretboard, so that you don't have to think about it and you can just play. And that's generally what I do, is I just play. But I've spent so much time working out like how these ideas work all over the fretboard that I have a little bit more freedom, and that's what I'm trying to show you guys. Okay, questions? Everything looks different on my my live stream thing here too today. I don't know what the deal is. One thing that once you learn an idea, I love playing this. It's Charlie Parker lick, and it's just from his solo. Let's see. Alright, and that lick is from his solo on the bebop tune Now's the Time. And I love that. Alright, so you're playing this chromatic idea, and I can look at that and go, hey, I'm playing from the third up to the fifth chromatically. Alright, and then I know that that's the third, root, 6, 5. That little part right there, 5, root, that's the 9 or the 2, minor third, third, and then chromatic up into there. So if I wanted to, I could play it there if I wanted to. Let's see. I talk all big game and then I can play it in other parts of the fretboard, and I can play it in any key. I'm not reliant on learning a lick in one key and only being able to play it in that one key. I can put it wherever I want to. If I wanted to, so let's play, let's find a B flat one here. Just randomly pulling these things out of my butt here. And I can always go. Hey Robert, actually I am literally just going through Jump Blues backing tracks on YouTube. None of these backing tracks today are mine. I am, unfortunately, I don't have very much in the way of good blues backing tracks on my channel yet. But this is something I should, because I end up teaching a lot of this kind of stuff. So, all right. Hopefully, you guys see the part of the thing that I'm doing here is I'm using these ideas that we're talking about. And then I'm also kind of combining them with some of the more rock and roll elements of Jump Blues, like the Chuck Berry-isms. Even I always love that. It's from the Eddie Cochran tune, 20 Flight Rock, where he's doing the pull-offs on the double stops. Right, but stuff like that just kind of, you know, at a certain point you need to kind of amp up the energy a little bit, and that's what I'm hopefully. You know, the combination of the rock and roll vibe along with the more sophisticated swing lines is kind of what makes the style for me. But it's the swing line part that I usually end up having to teach a little bit more, because it's a little hard to get your head wrapped around. Okay. Questions? You still there, Travis? So, if I wanted to, let's go totally out of context. And this thing's not going to load. So this is a different backing track, different style. And we're not going to play Jump Blues over it, but I'm going to take some of these ideas and make them work over this B minor vamp. So this is in B minor. So, all in B minor. When you're playing over something like that, you kind of want to play a little bit more modally, or you can get away with really just playing the scale all the way through there. All right, but in terms of playing ideas that make sense, I usually tend to think about not only how these notes work against the chord, and we've talked about this in some of the modal lessons, where, you know, you've got the same thing. You've got certain notes that are structural, that are actually just the chord tones, and you got certain notes that are kind of colorful. But I'm still taking ideas and kind of moving them through. All right, and trying to develop a motif. So like that last one, literally, I'm just moving shapes through the scale, right? I'm playing a B minor Dorian scale, which I'll post a lesson, a link to a lesson with that stuff in it. But it's as simple as just playing something where I'm starting on the root, I'm going down a scale tone, and then finding a note on the string below. Go down a scale tone note. Right. Right. This is not a real sophisticated idea, but sometimes even just finding like a contour of notes to kind of move through allows you something that you can develop, right? So if I bring this back a little bit, all right, even without playing that really repetitive thing, right? So I took the idea there, played it long, 2, 3, all right, and then I kind of shortened it up, and then, all right, and then moved that motif through the scale. Suddenly I had a phrase that kind of made sense even if you weren't hearing the whole pattern. So, all right, the coffee time. It's hard for me sometimes to teach the idea that it's not about licks as much as it is about developing melodies. Hey, Travis. You know, and getting someone to see an idea through a scale is kind of hard. With the jump blues idea, right, that's one way of looking at it, and it's a little easier to grasp sometimes because we're talking about 3 chords, and you literally can just take an idea and move it to a new place on the fretboard. Thanks, Travis. I will turn it up just a little bit here. I discovered that if I run the backing track out of my computer, it's out of sync with the audio from my microphone. I listened back to the last couple live streams, and it sounds like I'm playing really out of time. And then I realized that there's some sort of latency there, whereas if I just play out of my iPad into my Bluetooth speaker and let the microphone pick that up the same as it's picking the guitar up, then actually I don't have that problem. So you live and you learn. Anyway, so do you guys understand what I'm talking about, though? You know, a lot of this is about making melodies happen that are interesting, and there are certain ways of doing that, and one of them is just taking a simple idea and developing it. All right, other things that you can do, you know, if you're playing on a scale like this, if you're just playing stepwise, or you're just going up and down the scale, that's really a smooth sound. But if you start playing with really wide interval jumps, that becomes a little bit more dramatic. So that becomes another tool that you can use too. You know, for me, I love skipping strings, mainly because that gives you so much distance between the notes that there's a lot of drama in there. All right, I've spent a lot of time like practicing scales like this. You know, like I can do. We'll just put the track up here, and I'll play. You know, you can play the scale this way. Right? Okay, that works. Right? If I play it in, maybe in thirds. That's got a little bit of a sound to it. If I play it in fourths, every fourth note. It's a little bit more of a modern sound. Right? And if I do it in fifths, I really like that because the distance is so wide. And the two things going on there is that you've got the distance between the notes, which catches the ear. It's more interesting. But then also, if you're able to play through the scale all the way through with that interval, then it also gives the line a certain amount of logic. The ear will pick up. It's not going to say, hey, that guy's playing, you know, up the scale in fifths, perfect fifths or whatever. But it will just hear these patterns. You know, the ear recognizes patterns, and that's part of what I think helps in a context like this. All right, that gives you something to think about for a longer phrase. And I'll mix and match those ideas. I don't. I think if you play and improvise the way that you practice, your improvisations are really boring. You know, you really want to kind of come up with things that you can do, but not just solo using the things that you practice with. You know, you use these concepts as ways of manipulating the music you have in front of you. All right, so let me just, I'm going to play. I'm not going to play anything specific. Oh, went to E? All right. So I wasn't expecting the chord changes there in the backing track, and once I did, I was like, "Oh, cool! That's something different to play over." But could you guys kind of hear how I was mixing and matching some of the things that we've been talking about? When the chord changes happen, it was basically like flat 6 to 5 to 1 and then 4, right? So it's all like all the kind of chords you'd find maybe like in The Thrill Is Gone or some kind of a minor blues like that. All right, so I could play just the blues scale. I could actually hit more of the chord tones for each of those things. You know, or there's other scales that we haven't talked about. And chromatic ideas. Okay, Terry says, yeah, so this becomes the central problem with things like backing tracks is that, you know, in the real world, you're playing with other musicians who play things that inspire you, that you can interact with. The backing tracks are a good tool. For me, it's the intellectual part of it. You know, it's working on the skills that we're talking about, but you're 100% right is in that, you know, it's not the same as playing with other musicians, because once you start playing with the rhythm section and some other guys like Travis here, I've known Travis for 3 decades. We went to high school together, and you know, we don't play together much anymore because we're all grown up and have jobs and stuff. But even today, like, if, you know, a couple years ago, we got together with another friend and spent an afternoon jamming, and it's fun because the interactivity of it means that, like, he'll play something, I'll go, that's a cool idea, and I'll steal it and then try and do something else with it, right? So the ability to work with other people's ideas, or to have other people's ideas kind of push you around a little bit, that's a big part of improvisation, especially in jazz, but I think in any context, even like if you're at the blues jam, if you're playing with a good rhythm section and they're playing well and they're playing the right things and they're listening to you, because this is what it comes down to, it's about listening. If someone's got big ears, as we say, and they hear you play something and they interact with that something, that makes it more interesting for you, but it also makes it more interesting for the listener. Backing track doesn't do that, and that's just the reality of it. You know, it's funny because Apple in Logic has this AI drummer thing, artificial intelligence in my computer that plays drums, and it's funny because it'll do things like you can have it follow, like you pick a drummer personality, you figure out how complex and how loud and all this other stuff. It'll have a drum beat, but you can also have it follow like the bass track you put down, you know, or you know, you want tighter with your rhythm guitar part, and it'll listen to whatever your part is, and it'll adjust, and it'll make it sound almost like there's a person listening to what's going on and playing more cohesively with that. But I think we're a ways off from having interactive backing tracks that actually work with you the way a human being is going to work with you. You know, use the backing tracks for what they are. They're a blank canvas with a chord, you know, and don't look for inspiration in the tracks the same way that you're going to find inspiration playing with the human rhythm section. You know, look for the fact that you can actually do your algebra homework musically over them. All right. I guess that's kind of one way to do it. So, all right. It says here I have 13 people on. Who all is here and what platforms? Just do me a favor in the comments. Can you just let me know where you're seeing this? I'm trying something different because my original stream turned into a giant cluster. You know what? Whoops. There's me talking. Someone was sad. Okay, YouTube. Sounds like most of you guys are watching me on YouTube. Oh, my page here says all of you guys are watching on YouTube. No one's watching on Facebook. Okay, cool. All right, I'm going to open it up for questions and stuff. I'm sitting here yammering. I don't even know if this is really what you guys want to hear about. Travis used to have this thing he would say, I'm playing with a closed hand. And it was because he was trying to hide what he was playing so nobody could steal it. I still think about that sometimes. So... So I had mentioned also that I was going to talk about pedal board stuff. Yeah, on the thing is with the watching on YouTube versus Facebook is that YouTube, I'm still trying to get my. You have to accumulate so many watch hours. Sweet, I'm on Pornhub. I actually probably make more money. My YouTube channel isn't monetized yet. And you have to get a certain amount of hours, like watch hours and subscribers and all that stuff. So I'm really close to getting that threshold, but until I get there, it's like I'm trying to get everyone to like watch stuff through YouTube, so I actually get that credit there. So then YouTube can pay me, 40 cents a month like everybody else does. Turnarounds in the jump style. So here's the thing, like I only have a few of them that because I don't really think about it like the jazzier and the jump blues stuff. I don't necessarily know if I think about it the same way that I do it like a blues, but there are certain things that I will do. All right, so over the 2 and the 5 in the jump style, you could go. I'm in G. I'm back in G for a second. I'll play the 5 chord or the 5. So on G, I'm playing D, going down chromatically down to the C. So it's like the blues scale part. All right, and then I'll just play a G lick after that. All right, so if let's go back to. Here's a G one. This one looks like it'll be a cool. Hear that over the 5-chord part. I've never seen this channel before, but if you're into this sort of thing, I'm actually going to post this link to this track because this is like one of the first good jump blues backing tracks I've run across here. Give me a second and I will. So this guy here, this is a really good one so far. So comments. Oh, it doesn't let me comment on my own deal here. Travis, we're all clowns, Travis. All right, I'll put this in the comments of the YouTube video then. This is. So at what point does my day become messy here? Give me just a second and I will have this for you. Now I'm here. Okay, so I'm going to put this in the public comments. And part of the reason why I like this is it's kind of a, oh, it'll let me put it here now. All right, so I can't do it through my software, but I can do it through Shazam. Okay. There we go. That's the track I'm playing over. All right, but that's one of my favorite ones. It's just that simple. That guy right there. And I think I stole that from a Kirk Fletcher tune, if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure most of these are actually just Kirk Fletcher ideas that I've stolen. All right, here's another one of these, real simple. I'm playing in G. I'm going to play the 4, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5. So C, B, C, B, C. All right, and so much of the turnarounds on these kind of tunes for me, it's about really just nailing something over the 5-chord that sounds cool. And here. So, okay, so that's the idea. I'm sorry, Robert. I think some of this is probably on my end. I get the feeling my internet service sucks today. Let me just... actually, this has a... video monitor... in standard. Bandwidth statistics. What is this telling me? All right. I apologize. This whole day's kind of a shit show. No freezing there. Okay. So that's one idea. Another idea that I like, and it's stolen from the piano part on House is a Rockin' by Stevie Ray Vaughan. Right, it's basically... Okay. I just... my whole day started, Robert, with literally me starting the... Because you set up a... the way I do these is you set up the live stream ahead of time so I can give people the link and I can advertise it. And I started it, and then my internet crapped out, and then it canceled it, and I couldn't go back to the original link. So I'm assuming that any problems you guys are having are my fault, and I apologize for that. Okay, so let's see how this works, the piano lick, and then I'll talk about what it is over this. So that guy right there, all right, basically what I'm doing is I'm playing sixth. I'm hoping you guys know what sixths are. They're intervals where the notes are 6 chord tones apart, or scale tones apart, right? So I'm starting on the D, and I'm walking up. So this is the D, and here's the third of the D. So I'm walking up chromatically. So I'm going E, F, F sharp, and then walking it back down. And this is from the C chord. And I'm walking this down. This is basically part of the G chord right here. And I've walked it down to the C. And then I'll just play a blues lick after it. That's a favorite one of mine. And basically, you're just playing the line on 2 strings. This goes back to playing wider intervals are more exciting, you know. I'll play it super slow for you one time. Actually, let's change cameras here. Right, so here's so I'm walking up into it. And then walking down. So it's the same shape. And then I'm there on the 7th fret. And at that point, I depart this whole idea of the 6th. And I'm in the G blues scale. Right. A lot of times, you know, it's funny, like Kirk Fletcher and Junior Watson and those guys, when we used to have them in my studio at Premier Music, I always was amazed that a lot of their sound is them playing really close to the bridge for a lot of this. Even if they're playing a super cool vintage guitar that would sound nice and fat. Alright, so that's one of the parts of the sound there. Alright, that little bit there, I play that a lot lately. I'm not entirely certain why, but basically that's the 6th, root, 2 or 9, and then the minor third. Yeah, Kirk Fletcher is awesome. The couple times that we had him in our studio, he was just the funnest guy. He's like one of those people you just can't stop laughing around. No problem. Thanks for hanging out, Robert. I apologize for the technical issues today, and this will be kept, you know, so you can always go back and check it out. All right, so give me a second. Other questions? I'll give you guys one more of those kinds of licks that I like. Actually, I did a demo for a compressor. Nobody pays me for demos, but I like doing them because they're fun. And this is the Sir Woodshed compressor. I'll post this for you guys to check out. I don't know. I've been struggling playing this week, but like the solo, I kind of pulled this one out of nowhere, and it's not something that's really nowhere. It's something that I've played a bunch, but I haven't really thought about it in a long time. And it's probably pretty common kind of lick, but you know, I'm on the 5 chord, and and I've got the root right here, so D to D. Right, and you do this walk from the 5 up to the 1 chord. So, oh, what just happened here? You guys still with me? There we go. All right, so I'll put this in the context of this tune here. Literally over the 5 chord, I'm just walking from the root of the 5 chord up to the root of the 1 chord, and I'm just going root, octave, root, and then moving up 1 end, and then you're there at the end of that, right? So that's another way to kind of navigate through that last part there. Man, traditional turnarounds generally don't work that great, but licks. Say I play over this, I don't try and play a regular turnaround. So I'll play those. A lot of the times I will just play a lick over the top of that and end up on the 1 chord. Right. And as long as, if you're playing the triplets over it, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, and you end up in the right place, it's kind of a turnaround. So, all right. Questions, anybody? Questions, problems? So, me, I love this idea of jump blues. I've never been... It's funny, we have we used to have a very vibrant Southern California jump blues scene, and I've never been a part of it, and no one's ever hired me to play jump blues. And most of the guys that play that have this really great vocabulary that they've learned off of transcribing millions of records. And it's amazing how many records there are recordings of people that you've barely or have never heard of, but play this wonderful stuff. Tom Harkenreiter is one of the local guys who he's got a great website, and he teaches a ton of this stuff. And it's all stuff lifted off recordings, whereas my approach usually ends up being, I've got some of the vocabulary, and then I like to use some of that vocabulary in those devices with my other stuff. So I'll sometimes play country licks over it. I'll sometimes play, blue, like straight ahead blues and rock and roll stuff, but I'm always in the pocket. So what makes it a jump blues? Okay, so there's a thing that happens, in swing music, you had, like Count Basie, right? A good example, right? So early jazz, the early part of the 20th century, was kind of the New Orleans thing, which we think of almost like as Dixieland or traditional jazz. And it moves up to Chicago and out to New York. Those become the next two jazz places. When it gets to the Midwest, and when it gets to these cities, they start playing in bigger rooms. Because they're playing in bigger rooms and they don't have amplification, you have to start adding band members. So the instrumentation changes. And because you change the instrumentation, they have to arrange the music differently. The way that they play the music changes. But as it goes through the Midwest, and especially up to Chicago, you're following the workers from the South who, played what we now consider more country style blues up towards Chicago and Indiana and all those places. All those guys, they had this, they grew up with blues in what we call now gospel or spiritual music, church music. And the New York style stuff, like more like Duke Ellington, who's actually from Washington, D.C., it's really more arranged, and there's more European influences almost. But at the core of it, and also especially Count Basie, you have this kind of riff-based blues kind of thing going on, like Jumping at the Woodside. Bob, that is no. This is a long way to getting to answer your question, but it helps kind of understand what happens here. Is that all through the 20s and 30s, big band jazz, what we call big band jazz, which is really just jazz to these people at this point, it gets bigger, the bands get larger, it's expensive to keep them on the road. But in the 30s, leading up into World War II, it was the most popular music, so they could afford to do this. During and right after World War II, nobody could pay. They couldn't afford to keep these large bands going. Even like Ellington and Basie's bands were kind of running. I think Ellington's band was the one that was kind of running at a deficit for several years. And they eventually downsized these groups. But what became popular, and I think this especially happened in Los Angeles, was that you had this combination of musicians who played in the big bands who played swing music, meeting the workers that came like west for defense jobs during World War II in like the central Los Angeles area. And it's just a new style of blues, but it also became popular and affordable for band leaders to run. So you had stripped down groups, maybe 7 people, rhythm section, piano, maybe 1 or 2 horns, usually someone singing like Louis Jordan or something like that. So you still had blues chord progressions. Typically, you didn't have the 5 to the 4 chord, but it would usually be a 2 chord in the 9th bar and then a 5 chord in the 10th bar, or just the 5 chord like we've been doing. You've got these kinds of grooves, especially this is called a flat tire. Get right. Sounds like someone's got a flat tire and it's just flapping on the road. But it was fun, and I think a lot of serious jazz musicians looked down on it, like it was selling out. This is also about the time that bebop was real popular, and jazz was really being pushed into really more sophisticated directions. But this was fun music, and it's a precursor to the earlier rock and roll. They consider some B.B. King stuff jump blues. It's got the swingier feel to it. T-Bone Walker, Tiny Grimes. These guys played this music, and it's because there's the jazz element to it. The guitar playing ends up being a little bit more sophisticated. Right, and so we end up having instead of instead of that kind of thing, and that comes later too. But that's a big part of it. There's a couple elements that make it a jump blues. One of them is the chord progression usually has more of the jazz. The last 4 bars are more like a jazz tune. You end up playing more 6 and 9 chords. Versus and that kind of blues is more like what we call like a Jimmy Reed or a grinder or a lump, right? And you get into Chicago blues in the early 50s, and you've got certain elements that we have from jump blues, like the Little Walter tunes. We've got all these top and bottom parts with these cool chords. It's not very rural anymore. It's a little bit more of an urban sound, but that's not really jump blues. That's more like Chess Records and early Chicago blues, 50s Chicago blues, which coexisted with early rock and roll. Did that make sense? Basically, jump blues is kind of the jazzier cousin to, country blues or the various Chicago and Texas blues styles. The cool thing about a style of music that came out of the 20th century, especially the early and mid 20th century, is that because you didn't have satellite radio and you didn't have these national, iHeartRadio and things like that, local radio stations played more local music, and you had more local record labels, and you basically had smaller scenes that created smaller sounds. Texas blues sounds different than Memphis blues, sounds different than Chicago blues. In the very beginning of jazz and blues, we even have kind of a New York style blues like Bessie Smith and stuff, and a lot of that kind of blues is really where they've taken a group of jazz musicians and put a really good blues singer, almost always female, in front of them. And that's a lot of the stuff from like the 20s and early 30s. But all of these regional sounds are cool because that's where a lot of these artists that we love get their sounds from. Now everything is kind of homogenous. Everybody, I can, when I put my album out, it was being bootlegged in Russia and China, before I had it. Things just propagate immediately, and the regional sound thing doesn't really happen as much. In some ways, it's kind of neat to hear how music evolves, in different places. I don't know. That's kind of my prejudice on the whole deal. Is I kind of prefer this thing where you've got these regional sounds and these, stuff from the South. If it's New Orleans, then it's got that New Orleans vibe. There's Creole and Zydeco, and there's all that kind of stuff going on. Mississippi, you've got the backcountry, I guess they call it, stuff, which is more rural. Memphis, Kansas City, those were places in the 30s and 40s. They had their own swing kind of things. That's called Count Basie territory. But that's kind of what happens with this stuff, is that a lot of the blues, we grow up. If you look at my experience, so I'm a white kid. I was born in New York, Jewish kid, moved to California, learned how to play guitar in the 80s. I wanted to be Van Halen, which I never was. Came to blues mostly in the 90s, and through Stevie Ray Vaughan and through the rock guys. And you think of blues as one thing, and you don't really realize until you start looking backwards at the influences on all these people, where this music really comes from and why it sounds the way that it does. With you go Van Halen, you always talk about what an influence Eric Clapton was on him. You look at Eric Clapton, he's very influenced by Freddie King, B.B. King, very influenced by Robert Johnson. So you look at those guys. Well, Robert Johnson was kind of hard to know what he was influenced by. But it's nice because you look at the lineage of people's influences, and then you can kind of distill these things down. Stevie Ray Vaughan is one of those guys. You could hear where everything he steals comes from, but it still sounds like him. It gets filtered through his sensibilities. But you can hear the Albert King, you can hear the B.B. King, you can hear Lonnie Mack, you can hear all of these elements, Buddy Guy, that make up his playing, and it's really cool. And that's why I try and get my students to is like learn a bunch of other people's solos, learn about those artists, learn a little bit of the history of the music, get it kind of digested into your personal style, and then kind of forget about it all and just play, and you'll sound like you. So just kind of food for thought. All right, I've got a few more minutes. At 10 o'clock I gotta end, and I gotta get Terry's lesson going. We actually have to have some kind of actual lesson. So I'm going to open up for questions, and final apologies for the for the mayhem of this stream here. But so much, if you really learn the history of American and popular music, it just makes so much more sense, you know. Everything, you know, from from W.C. Handy to modern R&B, it just everything makes more sense, you know. So, all right, guys. I'll probably wrap it up. Maybe I'll play one more little. Here's a groovy swing in D. I just feel like jamming because I just haven't played much. This could be a shit show. Who knows? This is more the same thing. On that, I'll see you guys later. I gotta roll. Terry, I'll see you on Zoom in a minute. Bye, guys. Thanks a lot for hanging out, and thanks a lot for putting up with my crap today.